She walked away without looking back. No dramatic exit, no tears streaking mascara down her cheeks. Just a cardboard box with a photo frame and a coffee mug, carried through the service corridor at 6 in the morning while the building was still empty. 5 months pregnant, founder of the company, wife of the CEO, and now none of those things. The security guard at the back entrance looked up from his phone, confused. He'd seen her badge 1,000 times, Layla Brennan, Chief Technology Officer, co-founder. But she wasn't scanning in, she was walking out. She smiled at him, calm, almost peaceful. He didn't stop her. Something in her eyes told him not to. 40 minutes later, Derek Brennan woke up alone in their penthouse apartment. His hand reached across the silk sheets to her side of the bed. Cold, empty. He sat up slowly, blinking against the morning light filtering through automated blinds. On her nightstand, where her phone usually charged, there was only one thing: her wedding ring. No note, no explanation, no indication that his wife of 4 years had just erased herself from his life. He picked up the ring and stared at it. 3 carats, custom designed. He'd made sure the jeweler understood exactly how impressive it needed to look. For a full minute, he didn't move. Then he smiled, just slightly. The smile of a man who believed he'd finally won something he didn't know he was fighting for. He thought she'd finally broken. He had no idea she'd just finished building something else. The apartment was small, 600 square feet of cramped ambition in a building where the elevator broke twice a month and the neighbors fought loud enough to hear through the walls. Layla sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on a pizza box, fingers flying across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled across her screen, the architecture of something that didn't exist yet, but lived complete in her mind. Derek paced by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice smooth as honey. "No, I understand your concerns, but let me ask you this. What if I told you we could cut your processing time by 60%, not 50, 60? He caught Lila's eye and winked. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. They'd been married 3 months, together for 2 years before that. He'd found her at a tech meetup where she'd been explaining her app concept to a circle of blank faces. Everyone else had seen a quiet woman with messy hair, rambling about back-end architecture. Derek had seen something else entirely. He'd walked up to her after, handed her a coffee she hadn't asked for, and said 5 words that changed everything. "I know people with money." It wasn't romantic, it wasn't poetry, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. Derek finished his call and pumped his fist silently. Another potential investor interested, another door cracked open. He dropped onto the couch, the only real furniture they had, and pulled Layla toward him. "You know what I love about you?" He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You see things nobody else can see, and I get to be the guy who shows the world." She leaned into him. At that moment, it felt like partnership, like 2 people building something together from nothing. The app launched 8 months later. By month 3, they'd hit 50,000 users. By month 6, 250,000. The tech blogs started calling it revolutionary, simple, elegant, the kind of solution that made people wonder why nobody had thought of it before. Because nobody had a brain like Lila's, that's why. Derek handled everything else, the meetings, the pitch decks, the investor dinners where he wore confidence like a tailored suit. He was charming in ways Layla could never be, comfortable in rooms full of strangers, fluent in the language of money and ambition. And when they needed capital to scale, when the servers were crashing under demand and they were 60 days from bankruptcy, Derek did something she'd never forget. He sold his car. His Audi, the only thing he'd owned that was truly his, bought with 3 years of savings from his previous sales job. He came home that night with a cashier's check and a shrug. She'd stared at him, stunned. "You loved that car." He'd pulled her close. "Your brain is the investment, Layla. I'm just the guy who answers phones." That was the man she'd married, the one who believed in her before anyone else, the one who made her feel like they were a team. She'd hold on to that memory for years. Even when everything else turned to ash, she'd remember that version of him existed once. It made the betrayal so much worse. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Now, let's continue. The company grew. Then it exploded. 3 years after launch, they moved into real offices, glass and chrome, exposed brick, the kind of space that looked expensive because it was. Derek's name was on the door. Technically, Layla's was too, but visitors always assumed he was the founder. She was just someone technical, the quiet one in the corner who didn't come to parties. She didn't mind, not at first. The code was what mattered, the product, the thing she'd built from nothing. But Derek changed, slowly, then all at once. The suits got more expensive. The watch on his wrist cost more than their first apartment's annual rent. He started talking differently, dropping names, referencing golf games with investors, mentioning restaurants she'd never heard of. He was becoming someone else, someone who fit in rooms she'd never feel comfortable in. And then came the night she told him about the baby. Layla had planned it carefully. Reservation at the Italian place where they'd had their first date, new dress, the positive test tucked in her purse like a secret. She waited until after the appetizers, hands trembling slightly under the table. "I have something to tell you." Derek looked up from his phone. "I'm pregnant." The words hung there. She watched his face, searching for joy, wonder, something. He glanced at his phone again, typed a quick response to whoever had messaged him, then looked back at her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's great, babe. We'll figure out the timing." Timing. Not father, not family, not even excited, just timing, like she'd told him about a scheduling conflict. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. The gesture felt automated, something he'd learned to do. She smiled back, but something cracked inside her that night. Hairline fracture, almost invisible. Almost. Simone Alcott arrived 6 weeks later. The conference room was full. Derek, Layla, the board, 3 lawyers. Standard investor meeting. Layla had seen 100 of them, but she'd never seen anyone like Simone. The woman walked in like she owned the building, tailored blazer, heels that clicked with military precision, hair pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She shook Derek's hand first, held it a beat too long. "Mr. Brennan, your reputation precedes you." Then she turned to Layla. The smile shifted, warmer on the surface, colder underneath. "And you must be the genius behind the code." She extended her hand. "The architecture of your app is remarkable, truly visionary." Layla shook it. Simone's grip was firm, almost challenging. "Thank you. It's been a team effort." Simone's eyes flickered, something like amusement. "Of course it has." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Simone had done her homework. She knew the numbers, the growth projections, the weak points in their current infrastructure. She asked questions that made the board members shift uncomfortably. But mostly she watched Derek, the way he commanded the room, the easy confidence, the smile that made people want to agree with him. And Derek watched her right back. Layla noticed, of course she noticed, but she told herself it was business. Simone was an investor, an important one. Her fund could take them to the next level. At the end of the meeting, Simone stood and smoothed her blazer. "I'm impressed. I think we can do great things together." She looked at Layla one more time, that measuring gaze, like she was calculating the value of everything in the room, including how much space Layla occupied. Layla smiled and thanked her, but something in Simone's handshake lingered a second too long, like she was already measuring the space Layla occupied. The requests started small. Simone needed access to the technical documentation, standard due diligence. Layla approved it without thinking. Then she needed back-end credentials, just to understand the infrastructure. Derek said it was fine. Then came the logins. Layla noticed them at 11 at night when she couldn't sleep and decided to check the server logs. Someone had accessed the core codebase, the part that nobody touched except her. The login credentials belonged to Simone. She mentioned it to Derek the next morning, casual, curious. He didn't look up from his breakfast. She's an investor, babe. She needs to understand what she's investing in. But nobody needs to access the core architecture for investment purposes. He sighed, that sigh she was starting to hate, the one that meant she was being difficult. You're overthinking this. Simone's a professional. She knows what she's doing. Layla let it drop, but she didn't forget. Nina noticed too. Nina Cabrera had been Layla's assistant for 2 years. Officially, she handled scheduling and administrative tasks. Unofficially, she was the only person in the building Layla trusted completely. She came into Layla's office that afternoon, closed the door quietly, and sat down. Something's wrong, her voice was low. Simone requested copies of the technical documentation yesterday, all of it, including the proprietary frameworks. Layla's stomach tightened. Did you send them? I delayed, said there was a formatting issue, but Derek approved the request directly this morning. They sat in silence for a moment.
Nina leaned forward. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to start keeping copies of everything. Layla nodded slowly. That's probably smart. Nina didn't say anything else, but she started keeping copies of everything. The erosion was gradual, so gradual that Layla almost didn't notice until she was already drowning. It started with the small things, the way Derek stopped asking about her day, the way he'd check his phone during dinner, smile at something on the screen, then tell her it was just work. The way he started coming home later, then later still. Then the traveling began. Conferences, investor meetings, strategic dinners, always with Simone at his side. The first trip was 3 days in New York, meetings with East Coast investors. Layla offered to come. Derek had hesitated, just a beat too long. You should rest, babe. The baby, you've been tired. She hadn't been tired. She'd been working 14-hour days while growing a human being. There was a difference. But she let it go. The second trip was a week in Miami, FinTech conference, very important. Simone had connections there. The third trip was San Francisco, then Chicago, then back to New York. Each time Layla asked to join, each time Derek had a reason she shouldn't. We need her there, he explained after she pressed him one night. She knows these people, she speaks their language. And what language is that? He looked at her with something close to pity. Business, Layla, something you've never really understood. The words landed like a slap. She'd built the product that made those business trips possible. She'd coded through nights and weekends and holidays while he was out charming people at dinners. She'd solved problems that would have bankrupted them 6 times over. But she didn't say any of that. She just nodded and went back to her laptop. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Not yet. She was 6 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen. Her back ached constantly. And her husband was jetting around the country with a woman who looked at him like he was already hers. The exclusion started next. It was subtle at first. A meeting she wasn't invited to. An email chain she was accidentally left off of.
a decision made without her input. Then it became a pattern. Important meetings were scheduled when Layla had doctor's appointments. Updates happened in conversations she wasn't part of. Decisions were made and presented to her as finished facts. "You need to rest," Derek kept saying. "Focus on the baby. We've got this handled." We, not I. We. The worst part was watching Simone slide into spaces that used to be hers. Simone in the meetings with the big clients, Simone presenting the quarterly projections, Simone sitting in Layla's old chair during board discussions, asking questions about the technical roadmap like she'd built it herself. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said, "Actually, Layla created that architecture." Nobody acknowledged that the woman growing larger by the day in the corner office was the reason any of them had jobs. Layla brought it up once, just once, during a leadership meeting where Simone was explaining future product features. "Actually," she'd said, leaning forward, "that approach won't work with the current back-end structure. We'd need to refactor the entire authentication module." The room went quiet. Simone smiled, that thin, patient smile she used when she was about to destroy someone professionally. "I appreciate the input, but we've already consulted with the technical team. They believe it's feasible." The technical team was 4 junior developers who'd been hired 3 months ago. None of them had ever touched the core code base. None of them understood the architecture well enough to make that assessment. But Derek was nodding along, and the board members were nodding along, and suddenly Layla was the difficult one, the pregnant woman who couldn't let go, the founder who didn't understand that the company had outgrown her. She stopped speaking up after that. What was the point? The company holiday party was the first public humiliation. 300 people in a rented ballroom, open bar, live band, the kind of event that said we've made it without having to say it out loud. Layla stood in the corner, sparkling water in hand, watching the room she'd helped build fill with people who barely acknowledged her. A few employees nodded in her direction, polite, distant, the kind of acknowledgement you give to someone's wife, not someone's founder. She watched Derek work the room, handshake here, laugh there, arm around shoulders like they were old friends. He was in his element, glowing, magnetic. Simone stayed close to him all night, not too close, professional distance, but always within reach, always sharing the same conversations, always laughing at the same moments. A young account manager approached Layla around 9. "Mrs. Brennan, right?" He was nervous. New hire, probably. "I just wanted to say, I heard you were involved in the early days of the company." Involved. She'd built the company while her husband made phone calls. She'd coded through a miscarriage scare. She'd fixed a catastrophic server failure at 3 in the morning while running a fever. Involved. She smiled. "Yes, I'm still involved." He nodded, already looking for an exit from the conversation. "That's really cool. Well, enjoy the party." He disappeared into the crowd. Simone took the stage for the annual toast. "To an incredible year," she raised her glass, smile radiant. "And to the new phase we're entering, leaner, more focused, ready to dominate." She named the board members, the key investors, the sales team, the marketing director who'd only been there 4 months, the operations manager Derek had hired from his golf club. She didn't mention Layla once. Derek stood beside Simone, champagne in hand, nodding along. He didn't correct her, didn't add anything, didn't say, "And of course my wife, who built the product we're all here celebrating tonight." Just smiled like everything was exactly as it should be.
Layla set down her glass and left early. The band was playing something upbeat. People were dancing. Nobody noticed the founder slip out through the service entrance. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before she could drive. Her hands were shaking too badly. Not from sadness, something else entirely. That night, she confronted him. She didn't mention me, at all. I'm the founder, Derek. I built the thing she's toasting. He rubbed his eyes like she was exhausting him. You're being hormonal. Simone's a professional. This is just business. Hormonal. The word hung in the air between them, poison dressed as explanation. Layla felt something shift inside her. Not the baby. Something else. Something harder. She went to bed without another word, but she didn't sleep. The board meeting happened 2 weeks later. Layla had prepared for it. Notes on the new feature rollout, technical specifications, timeline projections, diagrams she'd spent 3 days perfecting. This was her domain, her expertise, her chance to remind everyone that she wasn't just Derek's pregnant wife. But when she walked in, Simone was already at the whiteboard. Perfect timing. Simone's smile was bright and sharp. I was just about to present our product roadmap. Our product roadmap. Layla sat down slowly. Something cold settled in her stomach. The presentation unfolded like a nightmare. Every slide contained ideas Layla recognized, things she'd mentioned in private conversations with Derek, late-night discussions about where the app could go, what features would matter, what problems they should solve next. The integration with banking APIs? Layla had sketched that architecture on a napkin 6 months ago. The machine learning features for user behavior? She'd explained that concept to Derek while they were cooking dinner one night. The enterprise security package? She'd written a 12-page proposal that Derek had said he'd read later.
Simone presented them all as her own, original strategic vision, revolutionary thinking. Layla's throat tightened. Her prepared notes sat untouched in front of her. She tried to interject. Actually, I had suggested something similar. Derek cut her off. Let's hear her out first, babe. Babe. In front of the entire board, like she was a child interrupting adult conversation. The room shifted. She saw it in their faces, the subtle embarrassment, the second-hand discomfort, the look people get when they're witnessing something awkward and can't wait for it to be over. The meeting ended with applause for Simone's vision, board members shaking her hand, Derek beaming like a proud father at a school play. Layla gathered her notes in silence. Nobody asked about her technical specifications. Nobody wanted to hear her timeline projections. Nobody cared that she'd spent 3 days preparing for a meeting that had lasted 40 minutes and hadn't needed her at all. She cornered Derek in his office afterward. Those were my ideas, every single one. I told you about them, in private, in our home. He leaned back in his chair. That expression again, the one that made her feel small. Layla, ideas are worthless. Execution is everything. Simone is executing. By presenting my concepts as hers? He sighed. If you want credit, maybe show up more. You've been distracted. Distracted. She was building a human being inside her body while keeping his company alive, while fixing bugs at 2 in the morning, while answering technical questions from junior developers who didn't know which end of a database was up, while her husband jetted around the country with another woman, and he called it distracted. She left his office without responding. There was nothing left to say. He'd made his choice perfectly clear. But something had changed in her, too. Something had hardened.
She just needed time to figure out what to do with it. Nina called her into a private meeting 3 days later. The conference room on the 4th floor. The one nobody used because the AC was broken and the windows faced an alley. Perfect for conversations that couldn't be overheard. Nina was already there, laptop open, face pale. She'd closed all the blinds. I didn't want to show you this. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been debating for a week whether to tell you, but you need to see who you're dealing with.
Layla sat down across from her. Her heart was pounding, though she didn't know why. Some animal instinct warning her that what came next would change everything. Nina turned the screen toward her. Messages, dozens of them, screenshots, between Derek and Simone. Not business, not even close. The first one hit her like a physical blow. "I can't stop thinking about last night." "Then don't stop." She kept reading. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "She's getting suspicious. Let her, she won't do anything. She's too pregnant and too tired to fight. You don't know her like I do." "I know her well enough. She's a coder. She doesn't understand people. That's why she needs you." Needed me. Past tense. Lila's vision blurred. She blinked hard, kept reading. There were more, so many more. Pet names, inside jokes, plans, promises. A message about a hotel room in Miami during the FinTech conference. A message about sneaking away during the holiday party. While Layla had been standing alone in the corner, her husband had been in the parking garage with another woman. A message about the future. Once the baby comes, she'll step back naturally. We just need to be patient. Then the company is ours. Ours, not his, not even Simone's alone.
Ours. Like they were already a couple. Like the company Layla had built was just another asset in their portfolio. She read the last message 3 times. "I love you. I've never felt this way before." Derek had written that to Simone while his wife was home preparing the nursery for their child. She closed the laptop gently. The room was very quiet. Outside, she could hear traffic. Inside, just the broken AC humming its useless rhythm. "Thank you, Nina." Nina's eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know if I should—" "You did the right thing. What are you going to do?" Layla stood up. Her hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, like it knew, like it was telling her to pay attention. "I'm going to do what I always do." She met Nina's eyes, held them steady. "I'm going to build something." Nina nodded slowly. "Whatever you need, I'm with you." Layla smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was real. "I know you are. That's why I'm going to need your help." She saw them 3 days later. She hadn't meant to. She'd come to Derek's office to drop off some server reports. Late afternoon. The hallway was quiet. Most of the team had left early for some company happy hour she hadn't been invited to. His door was open, just a crack. She heard Simone laugh, low and intimate, nothing like the sharp professional tone she used in meetings. This was a different laugh, private, comfortable. Lila's feet stopped moving before her brain told them to. She should leave. She should turn around and walk away and pretend she'd never been here. But she stepped closer instead. Through the gap, she could see them. Derek standing by his desk, Simone in front of him, close enough to touch, his hand on her waist, fingers curled around the expensive fabric of her blazer, her head tilted back, his lips on her neck. She watched Simone's eyes flutter closed, watched Derek pull her closer. They looked comfortable, practiced, like they'd done this 100 times, 1,000. Like this was their routine, their normal. Layla stood frozen. 1, 2, 3. She counted the seconds, each one stretching forever. In those 3 seconds, 4 years of marriage replayed in her mind. The wedding, the late nights building the company, the hope, the plans, the future they'd talked about while lying in bed together. All of it, gone, reduced to this. Her husband kissing another woman in the office her code had paid for. She didn't enter, didn't gasp, didn't announce herself. She turned around and walked back to her office. Her footsteps were steady,
Her breathing was even. Anyone watching would have thought she was just returning from a routine errand. Inside, something was different. Something had cracked all the way through. She sat down at her desk. The server reports were still in her hand. She set them aside, opened her laptop. The cursor blinked, waiting. She started typing. She didn't cry. She opened her laptop and started typing. Lines of code, architecture diagrams, a new file structure, the skeleton of something that didn't exist yet, something that would be entirely hers. The final phase happened fast. Derek and Simone stopped pretending there were boundaries. Decisions flowed around Layla like water around a stone. New contract signed without her review. She found out about a partnership with a major bank from a press release, read about her own company's expansion plans in TechCrunch. New team members appeared overnight, faces she didn't recognize sitting in meetings she wasn't invited to, voices in the hallway discussing projects nobody had told her about. Nina kept her informed, quietly, carefully, slipping into her office with updates delivered in whispers.
"They're restructuring the executive team," Nina told her one evening, "creating a new CTO position. They're interviewing external candidates." A CTO position, to replace the founder who'd built everything they were selling. Layla nodded. "Keep me posted." Simone hired a technical support team, 5 programmers brought in from a consulting firm, fresh faces with fresh NDAs and no loyalty to anyone but whoever signed their checks. They started appearing in the codebase, asking questions, requesting access to modules, documenting everything. One of them cornered her in the break room. Young guy, eager, probably had no idea what he was really being asked to do. "Hey, I was looking at the authentication module," he said. "There's this recursive function I can't figure out. It calls itself 6 times, but I can't find where the base case is defined." Layla knew exactly which function he meant. She'd written it at 3 in the morning after figuring out an elegant solution to a problem everyone else said was unsolvable. The base case is contextual. It's defined by the state of the parent process. He stared at her blankly. She didn't elaborate. They were mapping her work, trying to turn her brain into a manual, making her replaceable. But some things couldn't be documented. Some things only existed in the mind that created them. Derek took her to lunch that Friday. Nice restaurant, linen napkins, witnesses everywhere. He reached across the table and took her hand. His voice was gentle, concerned. "I've been thinking about you, about us, about the baby coming." She watched his face, looking for any trace of the man who'd sold his car to fund her dream. Nothing. "I think you should take your maternity leave early. You've earned it. Focus on the baby. We've got this covered. We." His thumb stroked her knuckles, the gesture that used to make her feel safe.
"I know the last few months have been hard," he continued. "Work has been crazy. I haven't been as present as I should be. But things will get better, I promise." She studied him, the practiced sincerity, the performance of concern. "You're right," she smiled. "I think I do need a break." He looked relieved, actually relieved, like she'd just solved a problem for him. He signed the temporary leave papers that afternoon, hugged her in his office, told her he was proud of her for taking care of herself. Simone watched from across the room, that measuring gaze, calculating. He mistook her silence for surrender. It was the most expensive mistake he'd ever make. They celebrated the moment she signed the temporary leave papers. Layla wasn't there, of course, but Nina told her everything. Simone opened champagne in Derek's office, the expensive stuff, Dom Perignon, the kind Layla had always thought was wasteful for a Tuesday afternoon. "To new beginnings," Simone had said, clinking glasses with Derek. to finally moving forward. They kissed, right there in his office, door wide open, like they didn't need to hide anymore. Why would they? The obstacle had removed herself. Simone moved fast after that. She was in technical meetings daily, asking questions about the architecture, demanding explanations of systems she'd never bothered to understand before. The new tech team tried to oblige. This API call, one of them explained during a session Nina secretly recorded, it connects to 6 different services, but I can't figure out the order of operations. It seems to change based on, I don't know, the weather? It's not random, another programmer said. It's some kind of dynamic prioritization, but the algorithm isn't documented anywhere. Because it existed only in Layla's mind, built through years of iteration, refined by instinct, the kind of knowledge that couldn't be reverse engineered from comments in the code. Simone grew frustrated. How is this possible? It's just software. We have the source code.
The lead programmer hesitated. Ma'am, having the code and understanding the code are 2 different things. Whoever built this, they were thinking on a level I've never seen. It's like trying to read someone's diary when they wrote it in a language they invented. Then find someone who can read it. They tried, brought in consultants, senior engineers, even a professor from Stanford who specialized in legacy systems. None of them could fully grasp what Layla had built. Meanwhile, Derek took Simone to the Italian restaurant, their Italian restaurant, the one where Layla had told him about the baby. He posted a photo, not even trying to hide it anymore. Just the 2 of them, wine glasses, candlelight. The caption, "Celebrating New Partnerships." The comments were full of congratulations, business associates who didn't know, friends who didn't care. Layla saw it that night. She was sitting in her apartment, laptop balanced on what remained of her lap, 8 months pregnant now, swollen feet propped on pillows, back aching. For a moment, she felt it all, the weight of what she'd lost, the life she'd imagined, the future she'd believed in. She looked at the photo for a long time. Derek's smile, Simone's hand on his arm, the restaurant where he'd seemed so distracted by his phone while she told him she was carrying his child. Then she put the phone down. She placed her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, strong, insistent. "Hello, little one," she spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Your dad's an idiot, but you and me, we're going to be fine." She picked up her phone and called Nina. "Is everything ready?" Nina's voice was steady, almost excited. "All of it. The lawyers signed off yesterday. The new company is registered. Carol transferred the first tranche this morning." "Good." Layla closed her laptop. "Because I'm done waiting." They thought she was home crying. She was home coding. The new programmers struggled too. Layla's code was elegant, but it was also dense. Years of architecture built by a single mind, connections that weren't documented because they only existed in her head. They didn't know it yet, but they were standing on a foundation they couldn't understand, and Layla had no intention of explaining it to them. Derek took Simone to dinner that Friday, the Italian place, the one where Layla had told him about the baby. He posted a photo, accidental, just visible in the background of a story about wine selection. Layla saw it. She was sitting on her couch, laptop open, pregnancy pillow supporting her back. For a moment, she let herself feel it, the betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer cruelty of it. Then the baby kicked. She looked down at her belly, this small person who didn't know anything about stocks or cheating husbands or hostile takeovers, who just knew that when Layla ate ice cream, things got exciting in there. She picked up her phone and called Nina. "Is everything ready?" Nina's voice was steady, almost excited. "All of it.
The lawyers, the new company registration, the investor, we're just waiting for you." Good. She closed her laptop, because I'm done waiting. They thought she was home crying. She was home coding. For 3 months, Layla had been living a double life. During the day, she played the role they expected: tired, pregnant woman, distracted founder, the wife who was stepping aside gracefully to focus on her family. At night, she became someone else. The new project started the day after she saw Derek and Simone together. Not a copy of her old work, something entirely new, the version of the app she'd always wanted to build but never had time for. She'd always compromised, cut features to meet deadlines, simplified architecture to accommodate less talented developers, made it good enough instead of making it great. Now there was no one to compromise for. Nina worked alongside her, every night, every weekend. They set up a small workspace in Layla's second bedroom, between the half-assembled crib and boxes of baby clothes. 2 laptops, a whiteboard covered in diagrams, a mini-fridge stocked with caffeine-free alternatives that did absolutely nothing to keep them awake. The new app took everything Layla had learned in 4 years and pushed it further. Cleaner architecture, the kind she'd sketched in notebooks during boring meetings but never had time to implement. Faster processing, algorithms she'd theorized about but never tested because there was always another crisis to handle. Features she'd dreamed about, integrations that would make the old product look like a prototype. She wasn't stealing anything, she was improving on herself. The lawyers confirmed it multiple times. Grace Chen, no relation to her investor Carol, just a coincidence, specialized in tech IP. She'd reviewed everything with the intensity of someone who expected to defend it in court. Your original employment contract has no non-compete clause. Grace actually smiled when she said it. Unusual oversight for a company this size. And any code you write on your own time, on your own equipment, belongs to you. Standard work-for-hire rules only apply to work done within scope of employment. What about similarity to the existing product? Different code base, different architecture, inspired by similar concepts, but that's not illegal. Grace slid a document across the table. You can't copyright an idea, only its expression. And your new expression is entirely original. She'd handed over a folder of case law, precedents, similar situations that had been tested in court. You're clean, Layla. Whatever they try to throw at you won't stick. The divorce papers came next. California law, no prenup, community property, half of everything. But Layla didn't want half of a sinking ship. She wanted to be gone before it went down. She asked for only what she'd brought to the marriage, her personal savings, her car, her share of the original company equity, the shares she'd earned as founder before Derek started diluting them. Grace had looked surprised. You could get much more. I don't want more. I want clean. The investor came through Nina's connections. Carol Chen had made her fortune in enterprise software in the 90s, sold her company at the peak of the bubble, spent the next 2 decades backing founders that the traditional VC world overlooked. Women, minorities, anyone who'd been told they didn't belong. They met for coffee at a small cafe in Palo Alto. Carol was 72 years old, silver-haired, wearing sneakers with her blazer because she said heels were a scam invented by people who never had to stand. Layla pitched for 20 minutes. Carol asked 3 questions, sharp ones, the kind that revealed whether you actually understood what you were building. Then she nodded. I'm in. She slid a term sheet across the table. I've heard rumors about what's happening at your old company. I don't invest in rumors. I invest in people. She tapped the paper. You're the real thing, Layla. I knew it the moment you started talking about the technical architecture. Your husband never could have explained it like that. The funding closed quietly. No announcements, no press releases, just money in an account and a ticking clock until launch. The final piece was the thing Derek would never understand. The original app, the foundation his entire company stood on, had a dependency buried deep in its core, a custom library Layla had built herself. Nothing malicious, nothing sabotaged, just elegant and complex, incredibly complex. She'd never documented it properly. There was never time. She was always putting out fires, building new features, doing the work of 3 people, while Derek took credit for 1. Now that lack of documentation would become her protection. The new tech team might figure it out eventually, maybe with enough time and enough talented engineers and enough luck, but by then it would be too late. Derek called her 2 days before she left. "Hey babe, just checking in. How you feeling?" She was sitting in her new office, small, rented, a room above a coffee shop that smelled of espresso and ambition. "Better, much better. I think the rest was exactly what I needed." "That's great," he sounded relieved. "We should have dinner soon, talk about everything."
Sure, I'd like that.
They hung up. Nina looked at her from across the room. She'd been there the whole time, reviewing contracts. "He has no idea, does he?" Layla smiled. None. She had moved on, just not in the direction he expected. The morning she left was quiet. 6 a.m., December. The building was empty except for a handful of security guards and 1 cleaning crew member vacuuming the lobby. She'd planned it on a Tuesday, middle of the week, everyone's guard down, no one expecting anything dramatic. Layla walked through the corridors she'd helped design, past the server room she'd built from nothing, rows of blinking lights that processed millions of transactions because of code she'd written in a cramped apartment that smelled like pizza and ambition. Past the conference rooms where she'd pitched investors and convinced board members and fought for every feature. Where she'd stood in front of whiteboards explaining concepts that would change the industry, while men in expensive suits nodded and asked questions she'd already answered 3 times. Past her old office, someone had already moved a box in, getting ready to reassign her space. Her badge had been deactivated the night before. She'd done it herself, one last act of control over something that had been hers. She stopped at Derek's office. The door was closed. He wouldn't be in for hours. He'd been coming in later and later since Simone started spending nights at the penthouse. She slid an envelope under the door. Inside, divorce papers, notice of resignation, contact information for her attorney. No note, no explanation, no final words. She didn't need them. The security guard at the back entrance looked up as she approached. The same one from the early morning months ago when she'd worked until dawn on a critical bug fix. He'd brought her coffee then, told her she worked too hard. She handed him a folded bill. "Thanks for not asking questions."
He pocketed it, glanced at the small box in her hands. "Good luck with whatever this is." She walked out into the December dawn. Cold air, pink sky, a city just waking up. A car was waiting, Nina at the wheel, engine running, heat blasting. "Ready?" Nina asked. Layla put her hand on her belly. The baby kicked, hard, impatient. "Let's go." The collapse began 3 days later. It started small, a glitch in the payment processing system, transactions timing out randomly, nothing catastrophic, just enough to generate customer complaints. Simone called an emergency meeting. The new technical team gathered around monitors, scrolling through error logs, trying to trace the source. "It's somewhere in the core architecture," the lead programmer said. His face was pale. He'd been awake for 30 hours. "But I can't figure out how these modules connect. There's no documentation for this section." Simone's jaw tightened. "Then figure it out. That's what I'm paying you for." They tried. For a week, they tried.
They brought in consultants, senior engineers, anyone who might understand what they were looking at. Every fix created new problems. The system was a house of cards, and they couldn't tell which cards were structural. Pull one, and 3 others came tumbling down. The payment glitches became data synchronization failures. The data failures became authentication errors. The authentication errors became a cascading nightmare that touched every part of the platform. The first major client called on day 5. Derek took it in his office. Simone listened on speaker, arms crossed, face tight. "We're concerned." The voice on the phone was calm but firm. The CFO of a Fortune 500 company that accounted for 12% of their revenue. 3 critical failures in 1 week. Your contract requires 99.9% uptime. You're currently at 94. "We're addressing the issues." Derek's voice was smooth, practiced. "This is a temporary. We're pausing our partnership until we see stability." The line went dead. Derek stared at Simone. "Get it fixed." "I'm trying." Her composure cracked for the first time since Layla had known her. "But the code, it's like reading someone else's mind. Only one person really understood how it all connected." They both knew who she meant. Layla posted on a Wednesday. A simple photo. Her at a desk, laptop open, baby bump visible. Behind her, a whiteboard covered in diagrams that meant nothing to anyone but her. The caption, "New chapter, new code. Details coming soon." No tags, no company name, no explanation. It didn't matter. Within 12 hours, the post had 50,000 likes. The comments were flooded. Is she starting something new? Wait, wasn't she the technical founder? What happened? Did she leave the company? I heard rumors. The tech journalists started calling. Layla didn't answer. But her old clients did. Her DMs filled with messages from contacts she'd built over 4 years. Engineers who remembered her from conferences, product managers who'd watched her demos, CTOs who knew exactly who had built the platform they depended on. "Heard you're working on something new. We'd love to talk. Whatever you're building, we want first look. Is the old product going to be okay without you?" That last question kept appearing, over and over. The timing couldn't have been better. Derek showed up at her apartment 2 days after the post. Layla opened the door slowly. She was wearing sweats, no makeup, 8 months pregnant and absolutely done pretending. He looked terrible, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, eyes red. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked. "You're destroying everything we built." She leaned against the doorframe, calm as still water. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just building something else. You should try it sometime." "Layla, please." He stepped forward. She didn't move. "We can talk about this, work something out. The company needs you." The company. Not him. Not their marriage. The company. "Like we talked about, Simone?" She kept her voice even. "Like we talked about pushing me out of my own company? Like we talked about waiting until the baby came so I'd step back naturally?" He flinched. "That wasn't... I didn't mean for it to..." "You didn't mean for me to find out. There's a difference." "I love you." The words hung there, empty, meaningless, a currency that had lost all its value. "No, Derek." She shook her head slowly. "You loved what I could do for you. Once you found someone who could do more, you moved on." She smiled. "The only difference is that I'm moving on, too." She closed the door. For a full minute, she heard him standing there, breathing, maybe thinking about knocking again, maybe thinking about what to say. Then his footsteps retreated down the hall. She didn't watch him go. The desperation at Derek's company reached its peak in week 3. Simone stood in the tech bullpen, screaming at programmers who'd been working 20-hour days. "How is this possible?" Her voice echoed off the walls. "It's just code." A young engineer, exhausted beyond the point of caring, answered her. "Ma'am, this code, it's like reading someone else's mind. The architecture is brilliant, but it's personal. Every function connects to 5 others in ways that aren't obvious. Only one person understands how this all connects, and she's gone." Simone looked at the empty desk in the corner, the one that used to be Layla's. Someone had put a plant there. It was already dying. For the first time, Simone understood the difference between owning a company and building one. The lawsuit came 2 weeks later. Derek and Simone filed an emergency injunction. The legal document was 30 pages long, full of accusations that painted Layla as a thief, a saboteur, a disgruntled employee who'd stolen the company's most valuable assets. Trade secret misappropriation, breach of fiduciary duty, tortious interference with business relations. They held a press conference the same day, Derek in his best suit, Simone beside him, radiating righteous anger. "We built something incredible together." Derek's voice shook with practiced emotion. "My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was part of that, but what she's done, it's a betrayal of everything we stood for." Simone took over. "We have evidence that proprietary code was copied, trade secrets were stolen. We will pursue every legal avenue to protect what we've built." The reporters ate it up. Bitter divorce leads to tech theft allegations. Founder accuses wife of corporate espionage. Startup civil war, husband versus wife in million-dollar lawsuit. For 48 hours, the narrative was theirs. Layla watched it unfold from her apartment. Nina sat beside her, refreshing news feeds, face tight with fury. "They're destroying your reputation." Layla's hand rested on her belly. "Let them." Then her lawyers responded. A single press release, 3 pages, accompanied by 400 pages of documentation. The code in Miss Brennan's new product shares 0 lines with her previous work. Architecture is entirely original, developed after her departure from the company on personal equipment outside work hours. Timestamps on all development files have been verified by independent forensic analysts from Stanford's computer science department. Furthermore, Miss Brennan's original employment contract contains no non-compete clause and no assignment of intellectual property created outside the scope of her employment. We invite any technical expert to compare the 2 code bases. They will find nothing in common except the exceptional mind that created them both. The forensic analysis was devastating. Side-by-side comparisons showed completely different code structures, different programming approaches, different solutions to similar problems. The new product used technologies that didn't even exist when Layla was still at the old company. It wasn't a copy, it wasn't even an evolution. It was something entirely new, something better. The tech community turned fast. This isn't theft. This is a woman who built something twice because her husband tried to steal it from her the first time. She was the founder. Everyone in the industry knew she was the genius behind the code, and they tried to push her out. Look at the architecture comparison. The new version is cleaner, more elegant. She didn't steal anything. She improved on herself. Then the messages leaked. Nina had kept copies of everything, every text between Derek and Simone, every email discussing how to dilute Layla's shares, every conversation about waiting until the baby came. The screenshots spread across Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, every tech forum that mattered. Once the baby comes, she'll step back naturally. We just need to be patient. Then the company is ours. She's too pregnant and too tired to fight. She's a coder. She doesn't understand people. That's why she needs you. The narrative didn't just flip, it exploded. Founder pushed out by husband and investor, built better product in her living room. Leaked texts reveal plot to steal pregnant founder's company. The real story behind the tech world's ugliest divorce. Derek tried damage control. More interviews, more statements, a carefully crafted apology that didn't actually apologize for anything. The messages were taken out of context, he said on a podcast. We were going through a difficult time. I said things I didn't mean. Nobody was listening anymore. The final humiliation came in a courtroom 3 weeks later. Layla sat at the defendant's table, Nina beside her. Grace arranging documents with the calm efficiency of someone who knew she'd already won. Across the aisle, Derek and Simone with their own legal team. 4 lawyers in expensive suits who'd charged a fortune to lose spectacularly. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses she kept taking off and putting back on. She reviewed the forensic analysis for 20 minutes, examined the employment contracts, listened to technical experts explain in painstaking detail why the 2 code bases had nothing in common except brilliance. Then she looked at Derek. "Mr. Brennan?" Her voice was flat, unimpressed. "Your attorneys have presented no evidence of code theft. The defendant's work is demonstrably original. Timestamps prove development occurred after her departure, on personal equipment, outside any scope of previous employment." Derek's lawyer tried to interject. "Your Honor, we believe—" The judge held up a hand. "I'm not finished." She removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly. Furthermore, the evidence suggests a pattern of behavior by the plaintiffs that borders on harassment. Pursuing legal action without merit, making public accusations without foundation, attempting to damage the reputation of a pregnant woman who committed the crime of being more talented than the people trying to replace her. The courtroom was silent. Case dismissed with prejudice. The judge's gavel came down hard. Plaintiffs are ordered to pay defendants' legal fees, all of them. Simone's lawyers began packing immediately. Simone herself sat frozen, staring at nothing. Derek looked at Layla for the first time since the proceedings began. She was already standing, already gathering her things, already moving on. She didn't look back. The hallway outside the courtroom was crowded with journalists. Simone pushed through them without a word. Her heels clicked against marble like gunshots retreating. Derek lingered. A reporter caught him at the elevator. "Mr. Brennan, do you have any comment on the dismissal?" He opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in his life, Derek Brennan had nothing to sell. He stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on his face. That footage played on every tech news site for a week. The collapse accelerated after that. Without Layla's reputation, without her technical credibility, without the genius that had built everything they were selling, the company hemorrhaged. Clients left, first in a trickle, then a flood. The app continued to crash and glitch. The new technical team worked around the clock, but couldn't stabilize a system they didn't understand. Within 3 months, they had lost 60% of enterprise contracts. The valuation dropped by half, then half again, then again. Investors demanded explanations. Board members resigned. The company that had been worth hundreds of millions was suddenly worth almost nothing. Simone tried to pivot. New product, new market, new strategy. But building something from nothing wasn't something she knew how to do. She knew how to take, how to acquire, how to leverage. Creating required a different kind of talent. The last major investor pulled out in month 4. The board voted to restructure. Derek was removed as CEO, a title he'd given himself when no one was paying attention. Simone stayed on as interim leadership, but there was nothing left to lead. The company that Layla had built in a cramped apartment filed for bankruptcy protection 8 months after she walked out the back door. 6 months after the morning she walked out, Layla sat in her new office. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was open, modern, filled with the quiet hum of focused work. Her team, her real team, people she'd chosen herself, occupied desks throughout the floor. In the corner, a bassinet, her daughter, 3 months old, sleeping peacefully. Nina knocked on the doorframe.
The numbers from this morning. We closed 3 new enterprise contracts this week. Layla took the report, scanned it, nodded. And the product launch tomorrow? Ready, Nina grinned. Full teams prepped, press releases scheduled, demo environment tested. Good. Nina paused at the door. There's something else. Thought you might want to see it. She handed Layla her phone, a photo from a tech industry newsletter. A small convention center, third-tier tech fair, the kind of event that charged exhibitors for table space and drew mostly students and hobbyists. In the photo, a modest booth, cheap banner, folding table covered with flyers. Behind it stood Derek and Simone. They were demonstrating something on a tablet, some kind of app, small, generic, the kind of thing a college student might build for a class project. 3 people stood in front of their booth, maybe 4. Layla studied the photo. Derek looked older, tired. The expensive suit was gone, replaced with business casual that didn't quite fit right. Simone stood beside him, smile frozen in place, eyes hollow. A young man walked past their booth, glanced at it, then looked at his friend and whispered something. Layla couldn't hear it, but she could imagine. Isn't that the guy who lost his company to his own wife? She handed the phone back to Nina. She didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel vindicated, didn't feel much of anything, really. She'd stopped thinking about Derek months ago. The divorce was finalized, the legal battles were over. He existed now only as a signature on custody documents and a lesson she'd never forget. Her daughter stirred in her bassinet, small sounds, not quite crying, just waking up. Layla walked over and lifted her gently, warm weight against her chest, tiny fingers curling. The notification on her phone buzzed, an article, Tech Monthly's feature on founders who'd rebuilt from zero.